Hello everyone, welcome back to Spectator Sports, where we cover sports from a spectator's point of view. I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca. This is episode number 122. And before we get into this week's episode covering topics in the NFL and the NBA, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. If you're new to Spectator Sports, we are on the grind to 200 subscribers by the end of the year. Please do us a massive favor to help this channel grow, reach a broader audience. Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to get clips from today's episode, we got that for you too here on YouTube in our various playlists, as well as on TikTok. And if you want to enjoy Spectator Sports on an audio experience, we got that for you too. I'll link the Spotify as well as the TikTok and the YouTube channel in the description. And let's get into today's episode. Going back to Thursday Night Football, the Green Bay Packers took on the Detroit Lions for the second time this year. The first go around wasn't the best showing for the Green Bay Packers, and despite being in a dome team, the Detroit Lions went into rainy Lambeau Field and outmatched, outphysicaled, and bullied the Green Bay Packers on their home turf. Since Detroit has looked dominant, and they have since not lost a game since week 2. They are 11-1 coming into this game, but they have had a few injuries along the way. Actually, they have 17 players on IR, with many of those being on defense. And with the Eagles' recent rise and winning 8-9 games themselves, many dubbed that the Eagles are the hottest team in the NFC. Now, on Thursday night, Detroit reminded us on who really is the NFC powerhouse, because they came up with a high-flying start, entering halftime 17-7 over the Green Bay Packers. And in the second half, you did see a good fight back from Green Bay. They actually took the lead, and they were in somewhat control heading into the fourth quarter. But yet again, Dan Campbell makes the plays, makes the decisions at least, to gamble late, and that proved to be evident in their 34-31 victory at the gun. And going from the Green Bay side of things, you can see that they're just 3-4 plays behind the Detroit Lions. I feel like they match up really well with Detroit, but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, Detroit is just better at this point. Green Bay had a really good day defensively. I thought that they shut down Detroit's running game with Sonic and Knuckles, with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. But in the process, they said, okay, Jared Goff, you go ahead and beat us. And on Thursday night, he did. Jared Goff, at least for a good portion of this year, has been an MVP candidate, and he had a really good day, 3 touchdowns, with 2 going to Tim Patrick in the second half. And yet again, it's really hard. You can maybe stop one part of this Detroit offense, but when Jared Goff is clicking, especially at home on a turf, fast field, fast surface, Jared Goff is going to make many defenses pay, and he did so on Thursday night. And with many people not really being too keen on Dan Campbell's wrists, I mean, you live and die with that aggressive nature. Last year against the San Francisco 49ers, he went for it a couple of times instead of opting for field goals and didn't convert, and that did lead to Detroit's eventual loss to the San Francisco 49ers at the NFC Championship game. He still sticks to his guns, which is something I can respect, and we'll see how often he can go back to that well of luck, and sometimes the well ends up being dry. But for right now, the gambles for Dan Campbell this season have worked. Detroit, with this win at least, has proven that they're one of the elite teams in the NFL. And with next week, they're playing the Buffalo Bills. We'll learn more about them. They're not quite out of the woods yet to lock up the division or the number 1 seed, because in the division, at least, the Vikings are right behind them, and the Eagles are also a game back of the Detroit Lions for the 1 seed. We'll see what they're really made of against a kind of a desperate Buffalo Bills team, who we'll get to a little bit later. But with the events that happened on Sunday, I think Buffalo is going to be coming out firing on all cylinders, and we'll see how they match up with the Detroit Lions. Detailing about the Packers side of things, I mean, you're seeing a good contribution from Josh Jacobs, who has been mostly good through this season, and with having a hat trick of touchdowns, you can see that Detroit's defense, especially in the running game, has some holes, especially with all those injuries starting to pile up. I really do think that if these two teams do meet again, which there is a pathway for, as if the Green Bay Packers get up get to the 6th seed in the NFC playoff picture, they would likely play either the NFC West winner or the NFC South winner. And between those two teams, I think they have been better this year, and they could upset one of those two division winners, and that would potentially set up a rematch in the divisional round against Detroit Lions. And like I said, they've been 3 to 4 plays behind or out of sync against the Detroit Lions. And the luxury is now you have 2 full games of tape. That's something that only Minnesota would really have at their disposal. And that is a distinct advantage. It's really hard to beat a team 3 times in a year. And especially with an encouraging second matchup on the road in Ford Field, you're right there. It just took a sweep of the leg from Jake Bates to make a Detroit victory, but I do think that Green Bay matches up well. And should these two teams meet again in the postseason, that we wouldn't be surprised that the Packers come up with an upset against the Detroit Lions. Despite the Eagles' win to go to 11-2 on the season against the Carolina Panthers, it's actually not so sunny in Philadelphia. The passing game wasn't as crisp as we expected, despite the return of Devontae Smith to the starting lineup after missing a couple games due to a hamstring injury. And A.J. Brown showed his frustration during the game and even post-game. When asked about how the offense could improve, he simply replied, passing. A.J. Brown is a very passionate player, and it's understandable for him to be frustrated when he is running wide open and he's simply not getting the ball due to Jalen simply missing the open read. And last year, when the offense was struggling out of the gates and AJ wasn't seeing the amount of targets that he's used to getting, he showed his frustration during the game, after the game, and the Eagles made adjustments. They focused the offense on him, and he went on a prolific run where he had 5 consecutive games posting more than 125 yards, and that led to him being Offensive Player of the Month. But this year, and at least this version of the Philadelphia Eagles, is much different. The past couple of years since A.J. Brown has joined the Eagles, they've been a pass-first type of team where they can pass it all over the yard. You're seeing explosive plays in the passing game. But this year's 2024 Eagles are a run-first team led by Saquon Barkley. And in the process, ever since adapting to a run-first type of team, they have gone on a 9-game winning streak. They're 11-2. And they're one of the best teams in the NFC, and Saquon Barkley is on pace to break Eric Dickerson's rushing record. And with that comes a price, and that is fewer passing attempts, fewer options, fewer targets for not just A.J. Brown, but also Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. While those sacrifices are appreciated, it's still something to acknowledge because that is taking out of production for A.J. Brown, and we've seen him show frustration in the lack of opportunities because they are now so limited. And this came to a head against the Carolina Panthers, where there were several plays where Jalen Hurts misses reads, particularly to A.J. Brown, where he's wide open. Think about the touchdown play to Devontae Smith, where that was actually the more difficult throw, where you could see A.J. Brown get freed up on a slant pattern, and he was wide open for what would have been an easy touchdown. Well, still, Jalen was able to complete the pass to Devontae Smith, which ends up being a touchdown, but the point is still made. And I understand, it is frustrating when you are doing the work and you're not getting rewarded for it, you're not getting opportunities. It's a league where you have to put out tape, you have to put out production to get more opportunities. And unfortunately, with the changes in the Eagles' offense and it being simply only one football on the offensive field, there is only so much you can do in those limited plays. You focus on your strengths, which is running the ball with Saquon Barkley, and the touches that he's gotten is drastically different than running backs of the past. When Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift were in Philadelphia, the running game was still part of the Eagles' offense and sometimes a focal point at times, but you could see that they still had a fairly more even distribution with run-pass plays. And now it's more run favorite. I think the possessions have been maybe about 60-40 in terms of run pass ratio, and that's great. I mean, it's working and it's leading to winning football, but there's going to be a time where defenses may be able to stop Saquon Barkley, and then it's going to force Jalen Hurts and this clunky Eagles passing offense to make some plays. And you have some of the best receivers to do so. Dallas Goedert, who will be back later, is a great tight end in this league. Devontae Smith has been a perennial Pro Bowl type of receiver and gets 1,000 yards consistently in his career. And A.J. Brown is an all-world top 5 receiver who can make game-changing plays on a simple slant pattern, and he is a threat to take it all the way for 6. Post-game, the comments weren't helpful, and Jalen also wasn't helpful because he basically said, that's not my job to determine who gets the targets, who gets the looks on offense. And to add gasoline to these burning embers post-game, veteran Brandon Graham unfortunately made some poorly timed comments talking about how the relationship is between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Now, before they became teammates, they were good friends off the field. They would train in the offseason, they would get together, hang out, whatever have you. They've been friends for quite a time before they were even teammates. But since AJ's trade over to Philadelphia and joining the Eagles, their relationship has changed, and that's been evidented by Brandon Graham coming on 94 WIP. And in the process, that unfortunately, at least in the initial comments, that makes it sound like there is a growing rift between the star quarterback and wide receiving duo. Now, the next morning, Brandon Graham walks back on the comments, but still, the damage is done. And unfortunately for the Eagles, they now face a ton of drama heading into a big game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And of course, the media from local level amongst Philadelphia media, sports writers, and radio analysts to the national level on ESPN and NFL Network are now dissecting what could be potential drama happening again in Philadelphia. And remember that the stains, the collapse of 2023 is still haunting this franchise. Whether or not they are able to exorcise those demons remains to be seen. They are looking good, but I feel like the ghost of 2023 is going to haunt this Eagles team unless they are able to shut up all the doubters and not just have a good regular season, but have a great postseason and even win it all. Now, as much as the recent week has been troubling for the Philadelphia Eagles, I'd like to show you some examples of how this is actually a non-story. Now, we know that A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts are close. In fact, Jalen Hurts is actually the godfather to one of A.J. Brown's children. Yet again, even including many battles on the field, and there are disagreements, there are heated moments, it's sports. There are passionate, heated moments in the faces of battle, but they come back as brothers. You can see that in their recent trip to LA against the LA Rams, where they recreate the iconic Fresh Prince of Bel-Air handshake between Jazz and Will Smith. And week later, they're posing for pictures in the win against the Baltimore Ravens in the locker room. And even pre-game, before the recent matchup between the Eagles and the Carolina Panthers, you can see that AJ, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts are all joining together arm in arm in a prayer circle. So tell me how a team that is marred, their locker room is coming apart, is actually showing this when you can see the camaraderie, the vibes are still high. Nick Sirianni, as goofy as he can be, is very transparent that he sees that the vibes are high. They're more like 2022, whereas 2023. Now, will that be able to be replicated on the field remains to be seen. Like I said, there's a big matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I do expect offensive coordinator Kellen Moore to come up with a scheme to not only just emphasize A.J. Brown, but to also fix the passing game. And that's a huge opportunity for the Eagles to shut up all the naysayers, all the critics, that this team is a force to be reckoned with. And when this offense is really firing on all cylinders, they are going to be very hard to stop for any opposing defensive coordinator. Kirk Cousins' slump continues as he threw 2 more interceptions in his homecoming against the Minnesota Vikings. The former Vikings quarterback was significantly outmatched to his successor in Sam Darnold, who had 5 touchdowns on the day, and Minnesota's been clicking on all cylinders since their mid-season little slump, dropping 2 games in 5 days. they have responded really, really well. I think with Jordan Addison now getting into the mix, with Justin Jefferson being a superstar, this is one of the best wide receiving duos in the NFL. And when those two are cooking with Sam Darnold, Minnesota is really tough to beat. It's unfortunate that they will likely have to go on the road for much of their postseason run unless significant events happen to change or alter the NFC postseason picture. But I do think that this team can travel. They do have a couple tests coming up with Detroit later to finish off the season, but also going up to the Pacific Northwest to play the Seattle Seahawks, who they might actually play in the postseason anyways. So we'll see how this team does travel, because it looks like they will have to travel. But getting into Sam Darnold, I also think that with the QB situation in Minnesota, you're seeing that, yes, Minnesota has used draft capital to get J.J. McCarthy, who was great in college with Michigan, leading them to a national championship. However, since his rookie season has kind of gone off the rails with his knee injury, leaving him out for the season with another cleanup surgery to boot, I wouldn't be opposed to Minnesota bringing back Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold has played well in this system. He has good chemistry, and that is a great mark of Kevin O'Connell's offense. It is very QB friendly. I mean, for even a bit last year, we saw Dobbs played really well in limited stints in substitution for Kirk Cousins. Regardless, Sam Darnold is going to get a bag from some team, but I really do hope for Sam Darnold's case it is in the right situation. And for a team like Minnesota, who he's had success with, maybe he can give him a little bit of a hometown discount. I don't really like investing money, especially millions of dollars, to unknown commodities. I've been consistent on that with this channel. With guys like Daniel Jones, an unknown commodity, a one-hit wonder, the Giants screwed themselves when they could have paid Saquon Barkley, a known commodity. You don't know everything about JJ because he's only played in a couple preseason games and had a good college career, but that was surrounded by great D1 talent. You don't get that in the NFL. And Sam, yes, has struggled for most of his career, but again, that was all bad situations, poor management with the Jets, poor management with the Carolina Panthers, and now with a competent organization, especially a competent head coach and offensive scheme with talented weapons, he's flourished. He's done excellent. I don't think that Sam should get the super max amount of dollars that we're seeing with Dak Prescott or maybe what Brock Purdy could command in the next couple of off seasons, but Sam could easily sign for a Kirk Cousins-like deal. And if the Vikings play their cards right, they could make it friendly to both, where they do give Sam Darnold money he hasn't seen since entering the NFL, and also still finding a way out, because I think the best case for Minnesota is to bring back Sam on a 3-year deal. And then if it doesn't go well, you do have J.J. McCarthy, but at least he can sit back and still learn from a guy like Sam Darnold. He could be the QB of the future for the Minnesota Vikings, but for right now, the Vikings have exceeded expectations in the quote-unquote rebuilding, retooling year, and they could very well be Super Bowl contenders if things go right in the postseason. And we've already addressed the Kirk Cousins side of things, especially in our last episode. I'll link that clip for you in the description. But Kirk Cousins has struggled, and now this is 4 games in a row where he hasn't had a passing touchdown. And in that 4-game slump, he's passed for 0 touchdown passes and 8 interceptions. Like I've said, post-Achilles surgery, he was okay to start, but since maybe the turn of November, it's been anything but for Cousins. And for Cousins, the zip isn't there, especially driving off the back foot. I'm seeing a lot of flutter balls, a lot of lame ducks out there, and just the accuracy. I mean, look at the pass going to Kyle Pitts. It's significantly off target, and yes, it's a great play with a one-handed interception, but the accuracy was something that was Kirk Cousins' calling card. He takes a 3-step drop, it takes a 3-step drop back, and the ball's out quick, on time, pinpoint pass. The calls for Michael Penix are only getting louder, and Raheem Morris has a decision to make to save this season, because they're 6-7. They started 6-3, and they had a tiebreaker over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, like I said, have been missing their top 2 targets, but since then the Bucs have started to win. And we can also say that Atlanta has had a brutal schedule, but Tampa Bay had no business coming back into this division race, but here they are. They stand a game ahead of them. They do have an easier schedule coming up compared to the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta thought bringing Kirk Cousins into their system would be kind of like a Tom Brady move for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2020, where Tampa was looking for a signal caller and they gave up on Jameis Winston, but they had a really talented core. They just needed somebody to pilot this offense. And with Kirk Cousins in there kind of doing their own rendition of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that was a possible outlet. But with the Achilles injury and drafting Michael Penix Jr. kind of reminds me of how Carson Wentz ended his last season in Philadelphia. Carson came off of a couple of decent seasons, especially lifting a very talentless team to the NFC playoff picture. But with drafting Jalen Hurts, it just felt like Carson had to look over his shoulder and every throw was under a microscope. And we're seeing that again with the Atlanta Falcons, where Michael Penix Jr., while is a project, kind of a raw prospect, that decision might be proving to be their doom, where Kirk is looking over his shoulder and he's really forcing things where they don't have to be, and it's only a matter of time until they eventually do have to look and turn the page on Kirk Cousins and look at the quarterback in the future in Atlanta with Michael Penix Jr. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Shout out to Joey for editing this podcast. And remember, if you want to help Spectator Sports grow, reach a broader audience, we're going to need your help. We are on the grind to 200 subscribers by the end of 2024, but we're going to need your help. Drop a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody.